Thank you, Council Tal. Thank you, Mr. President MS Ba, my colleague Anita Mahoney, and the head of the EWC, Yankuba. I think Council Tal has already given you the background of what I'm about to read. And I will just go straight to the point and read the position paper that was co-drafted by Gambia Participate, EWC, and the Edward Francis Small Center for Rights and Justice. Position paper on the deleted clause 14 of Election Bill 2021 and its impact on diaspora voting. Introduction. The right to vote and be voted for in public elections is a constitutional right. The 1997 Constitution stipulates in Section 26 the political rights of Gambians, which includes the vote or to be voted for in elections. In Section 39 of the 1997 Constitution, the Constitution states further that every citizen who is 18 years and of sound mind has a right to register as a voter to vote in public elections. The Elections Act of 1996 aligns with these constitutional provisions. Section 11 of the Elections Act states that the IEC will register all Gambians, including maintaining and compiling a register of Gambian voters in foreign countries. Section 12 of the Elections Act provides the requirement for qualification for registration, among which is one has to be registered in the constituency in which one resides or was born. Further, Section 141 of the Election Act gives the IEC the power to make rules for Gambians in the diaspora to vote in presidential elections. The Supreme Court, in its 2021 ruling, confirmed that all Gambians, including those in the diaspora, have the right to be registered and to vote, as provided for in the Constitution and the Elections Act. These provisions of the Constitution and the Elections Act, as well as the Supreme Court ruling, clearly do not only guarantee the right to vote of all Gambians, including those in the diaspora, but also places a clear legal and political obligation on the executive, legislature, and the IEC to give effect to these provisions. Background of diaspora voting efforts. The fight for diaspora voting rights has spanned over 25 years. Key milestones include, in 2012, the main opposition parties, in this case the UDP, NRP, GMC, GDPD, NCP, and PDOIS, form an alliance advocating for electoral reforms, including diaspora voting. In 2015, a 12-point proposal was submitted to former President Jammeh, Jesse Jackson, and the United Nations demanding diaspora voting rights. In 2016, the coalition 2016 led by the current President Adam Barrow, explicitly included diaspora voting in its manifesto. Gambians abroad played a crucial role in securing victory for this coalition. In 2019, to date, the IEC, National Assembly, Ministry of Justice, political parties, civil society, and diaspora representatives engaged in multiple consultations on the election bill, agreeing that diaspora voting is a constitutional right that must be actualized. Purpose of this position paper. The purpose of this position paper on the deleted clause 14 of the election bill is to provide clarity and guidance to members of the National Assembly to reintroduce and restore clause 14 into the election bill under consideration. It seeks to provide answers to the divergent and conflicting perceptions that led to the deletion of the clause, and thereby generate enough clarity to encourage members to reintroduce the clause using the procedure provided in the standing orders of the National Assembly. Justification by parliamentarians. Many parliamentarians who voted for the deletion of clause 14 cited its incompatibility with section 39(1) of the 1997 Constitution, which states, and I quote, "Every citizen of the Gambia being 18 years or older and of sound mind shall have the right to vote for the purpose of elections of a president and members of the National Assembly, and shall be entitled to be registered as a voter in a National Assembly constituency for that purpose. Their interpretation, end quote, their interpretation of this section, especially the language, shall be entitled to be registered as a voter in a National Assembly constituency, means that a new constituency for the diaspora must be created, which will require amendment of Section 88 of the 1997 Constitution to increase the number of National Assembly constituencies. This was the position of many parliamentarians that voted against Clause 14. Our position on Section 39 of the 1997 Constitution. Our position is Section 39(1) of the 1997 Constitution confers the right to vote to all citizens of age and sound mind and the registration of eligible Gambians under a National Assembly constituency to be able to exercise their suffrage regardless of their residency. The Supreme Court of the Gambia, in the case of Bakari Bunja Dabo and others versus the Attorney General and Independent Electoral Commission in 2021, interpreted Section 39 as follows. And I quote, pursuant to Section 39 of the Constitution, every Gambian, including those residing outside the jurisdiction, is entitled to be registered and to vote in the election to the offices of President, members of the National Assembly, for local government offices and traditional rulers, as well as referenda. End quote. This interpretation by the Supreme Court leaves no ambiguity for the registration and voting rights of Gambians residing outside the Gambia in public elections. To be registered, in quote, in a National Assembly constituency means the established constituencies created by the IEC, which according to the 2015 Constitutional Amendment are 53. IEC, while conducting its voter registration exercise, should register eligible voters wherever they may be residing under the existing National Assembly constituency. Section 11 of the Elections Act of 1996 further provides for the IEC to prepare and maintain a register of voters for each constituency and a register of Gambian registered voters in foreign countries. The qualification to be registered as a voter is set out in Section 12 of the Elections Act. Specifically, Section 12C provides that a person should be registered in the constitution one resides or where one was born. In addition, Section 141 of the Elections Act states that, and I quote, the Commission may make rules for Gambians in any foreign country to vote in a presidential election, end quote. It is worth noting that this Section 141 in the Elections Act is what has been transformed into Clause 14 in the Elections Bill 2021. Both provide for the IEC to register and make rules for Gambians in the diaspora to vote in public elections in the Gambia. In light of the foregoing, it is our humble view that the current legal framework provides for the registration and voting of Gambians residing abroad to vote in public elections. Clause 14 of the Election Bill is not incompatible with Section 39 of the 1997 Constitution. Clause 14(1) of the Election Bill is consistent with Section 26 and 39 of the 1997 Constitution and the Supreme Court 2021 ruling on Bakari Bunja Dabo versus AG and the Independent Electoral Commission, all of which extend voting rights to every Gambian, every citizen of the Gambia at home and at abroad. In addition, Clause 14 provides for the further legal guidelines for the IEC to formulate rules in facilitating the registration and voting of Gambians living outside the Gambia. Why Clause 14 should be reinstated? 1. Clause 14 aligns with the 1997 Constitution and the 2021 Supreme Court ruling. Clause 14 does not contradict Section 39. Rather, it provides legal guidelines globally and regionally, demonstrate that diaspora voting is possible without requiring separate constituencies. Gambians abroad can be registered under their birth constituencies or former places of residence, as permitted by Section 12 of the Elections Act. Deletion of Clause 14 contradicts the principle of democracy and good governance. Excluding diaspora voters undermines democratic participation, human rights principles, and the rule of law as affirmed by the Supreme Court of the Gambia. Our call to action to members of the Parliament. Number one is to reintroduce Clause 14 with minor adjustments. Substitute the word shall with may in Clause 14.2 of the Elections Bill. To ensure IEC discretion in consulting with Cabinet and the Inter-Party Committee, which must not be a legal obligation upon the election management body. 2. Maintain presidential election and referenda. Keep within bounds diaspora voting to presidential election and referenda for now. Removing ambiguous wording such as, and I quote, or any other elections as determined by the Constitution or any other law from Clause 14.2. This will at least remove any ambiguity and accommodate diaspora to vote in subsequent presidential elections and referendums until such time when the necessary legal framework to facilitate the diaspora to vote in local and constituency elections are established. Uphold constitutional and democratic obligations. We remind National Assembly of their duty under Section 17(1) of the Constitution, which mandates respect for fundamental human rights by all branches of government, including the legislature. 4. Act before the 2026 presidential election. Failure to reinstate Clause 14 with amendment will perpetuate an unconstitutional system that denies Gambians abroad their rights. Set a regressive precedent for future electoral laws. Conclusion. The removal of Clause 14 from the Election Bill 2021 is a direct infringement on the constitutional rights of Gambians living abroad and total disregard of the verdict of the Supreme Court of the Gambia. It effectively disenfranchises almost 250,000 of Gambians abroad who have long fought for the right to participate in national elections and continue to contribute immensely on the country's economy. We urge the immediate reintroduction of Clause 14 with minor amendments to ensure Gambians abroad can vote in the 2026 presidential election and future referenda. The time to act is now to safeguard democracy, uphold constitutional rights, and respect the sacrifices of Gambians worldwide. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much.
Well, our position is that the diaspora does not need to be registered as a separate constituency. Because if you look at the qualification, it looks at where you were born. So every Gambian is born in the constituency or where you reside.
Yeah.
So if you are born, let's say, from Senegal, Banjul, I register in Banjul North, and I travel to England, right? I mean, for the purpose of registration, IEC will register me as somebody, as a constituent of Banjul North. That would deal with that issue. So I don't think it's a real problem. I think it's a problem that can be easily dealt with by just registering everybody in either because you don't reside in the Gambia, so your qualification will not be tied to your residency, but to your birth. Where were you born? You were born in, every Gambian is either born in a constituency or reside in a constituency. And in the case of those outside, you will look at where they were born, where they registered. So you register them where they were born. I think that in simple terms will solve the problem.
And I think, in addition to that, the confusion here is Section 88 is talking about the composition of constituency in the National Assembly. It says that the National Assembly shall comprise of 53, it used to be 48 until it was amended in 2015 to 53
at least
constituencies, right? So it is talking about the National Assembly. Yes, IEC register voters under the existing constituencies as well. However, we need to also understand that presidential election, the country is treated as one constituency. We all vote towards the national office, that is the office of the president. The same thing with referendum. If we want a diaspora constituency where we will have the diaspora representing the diasporians, then the amendment of Section 88 will be required
Yes.
to create a diaspora
Separate.
constituency to represent them.
Yes.
And that will mean for right now, what is possible is diaspora can vote in presidential elections under our existing electoral and constitution framework. They can vote in presidential election and referendum. Where they cannot vote right now is parliamentary elections, councillorship election, and mayoral election, because that will require demarcating a constituency for the diaspora. So 2026, the diaspora should be able to vote. Now, removing it, as Council Star stated, they are going to make the matter worse than the current existing Gambia constitution that he mentioned, which accommodates diaspora. So it is to make it better, but not to make it worse.
Thank you. I think it's very clear.
Parliamentarians virtually, that's what we can do right now, because they're already in session. We cannot convene them and have a conversation on this, but we're going to be sending this to parliamentarians. Obviously, we're also going to put it on our websites, share the link with them, but at the same time as well, we will have the FAQ ready, right, for parliamentarians as well.
Yeah, I would also like to add to that. I think, as you rightly said, on the 25th, they will resume consideration of the bill. I think they are now in clause 18, so they've gone past 14. I think it will take a series of sessions to really finalize this bill. So there's still a window within which Parliament have the power and right understanding order to bring it back. So I think our advocacy is ongoing. So we will, of course, send these documents to the parliamentarians. And further, we recognize that the Parliament, have the power to make laws, and we're not in any way challenging the power to make laws. But they must also make laws in line with the limits set by the Constitution. And also, they must make laws which we believe is in the interest of the population. And in a democracy, we don't always agree. So we think that our advocacy is to help to assist parliamentarians to make a better informed decision about this clause. We think that from our initial constitution and from what we see in the media, some of them have spoken to the media, the explanations they've given as to why they deleted this clause, I think, is based on a misunderstanding of the legal position. Because some of them said very clearly, some of the very vocal ones said very clearly that they don't want to make a law that's against the Constitution. So we want to help bring them back and say, well, in fact, deleting this clause may actually contradict the Constitution.
Against it.
And it is by actually reinstating this clause, you are acting in line with the Constitution, because already this clause in a different form exists in the current law, and it's the same Constitution. So there cannot be any constitutional problem. In terms of the Section 88, as Mara said, that will only be applicable for amendment in the case you're talking about diaspora running for office or they want to vote in parliamentary. So for now, what is possible without any legal question or doubt is being able to vote in presidential and referendum. And that message, so we can look at it on an incremental basis. If diaspora cannot have everything, at least for now, give them what they already have. It's there already. It's theirs, and Constitution is provided for and mandated. So you cannot take a step that will now take away what they have. So I think that's what we want. And we think, we think our NAMs, any right-thinking National Assembly will respect. Once they really fully understand these issues, I think those who vote against I presume, would rethink their position and then also support the reinsertion of clause 14.
And that's why we also, in our position paper, stating that the Parliament should reconsider amending clause 14.2, especially the phrase which says, or any other elections as determined by the Constitution or any other law. Because that will also mean the rest of all the elections. But for now, If they're able to remove that, then they will be consistent with all the legal frameworks that allow diaspora to vote in elections, especially, more specifically, the presidential and referendum, right? So that is what is possible for now.
Thank you. I think my name is
Anywhere you go. In Nigeria, they have a voter population of how much? Is it 98 million people? And we've observed election in that country. It is a logistical nightmare, but it is a constitutional mandate. That's why election management bodies are established to hire competent officials to find solutions to those logistical nightmares. Right? The OIC was a logistical nightmare, but we were able to achieve that. And it was just a 2-day event. Election is just a 1-day event, as in, though there are preparation that is being done, but the election itself is done in a day. Though it requires a lot of work. So the logistical nightmare that the government was able to overcome to host the OIC, they could actually even do better. So to say it is a logistical nightmare and not doing it means you are going against the principles that are outlined in the 1997 Constitution to exercise universal adult suffrage. So there is no excuse. We might talk about other legal issues, but to say it's a logistical nightmare, I think that is a very, very, not good excuse that they should bring about.
Yeah, I would just like to chime in. Matt is I'm not an election expert. I can talk about the law. So Matt, I defer to Matt on matters of logistics and practicality of election. But I just, as a citizen, I'm speaking as a citizen, not as a lawyer now. I was really, when I was listening to Professor Jibril Fowle of MSDG, they have done tremendous work for many years, looking at these issues and challenges. And I think he was in a program on QTV, and he said something that really struck my mind. He reminded us, he went down memory lane history. It's very important to go back to memory lane. In the Gambia, in the past, only those in the Como St. Mary's could vote. So Gambia, as far as the British were concerned, is Banjul or Como St. Mary's. All the Gambians don't have the right to vote. And what was the excuse? It was a logistical nightmare. So for that reason, Gambians outside couldn't vote. But the founders of this nation, some of them fought to ensure that every Gambian in every corner of this country is able to vote, no matter how difficult it is or how challenging it is. For me, I don't even call it name. I call it a challenge. I mean, Gambia, we have addressed way more difficult challenges than diaspora voting. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Are we the only country in the world, or in this region, that is doing this? We can benchmark ourselves with other countries. How did Senegal do it? How is Nigeria doing it? How are other countries doing it? And have we seen any position paper from IEC saying that we've done a study of the challenges of diaspora voting, and these are our constraints? Have anybody seen anything like that?
No.
Has there been any concrete steps taken to look at the problem and see whether there's a solution? Have they reached out to others to support them in case they cannot solve it? So in my opinion, that is just not an acceptable reason to deprive Gambians of their constitutionally mandated right. Really.
Yeah.
And going back to section, that clause 14, actually, if you read it, it did also talk about hiring election officials in these areas where IEC is actually going to be conducting elections for the diaspora to vote. Right? That same clause 14 did talk about that. And IEC is actually going to be drafting rules and regulation and procedures as to how to go about this. And they could do this study by referencing to other countries that have already done, like South, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. So logistical nightmare is just an excuse, but it's not something that is consumable.
Even in the Gambia, you see villages, people...
On the issue of the attestation, but before coming to the attestation, let me first possibly say a little bit on the diaspora voting. Being a logistical nightmare, if we have Badibunkas in the hall here, going to Badibu to vote is already a nightmare. How do they get the ballot drums to Badibu? Knowing fully well that young people protested at some point when the ferry was not going.
Yeah.
So how did they manage to get the ballot drums to Badibu for them to vote? That's already a nightmare. So getting into extending it to diaspora to vote is about strategizing, just like you strategize to get it from Kanifing all the way to Badiou or get it to Kiang. Not those on the road, but Kiang West, if you've been there, you know how that place is like. But we managed to have everybody participating in and voting in the electoral process. But also, elections don't come cheap. That we need to understand as a country. For us to exercise our franchise, that's the right to vote, it doesn't come cheap anywhere. We'll have to provide the resources. If it is not available, the IEC and the Assembly is supposed to look around means of raising those resources to making sure people definitely exercise that right to vote. It is one that we should all hold dearest to our heart. On the issue of the attestation, I would say it's when the issue came up, we just had a small reflection around it, yet to develop a second position paper to that effect. But I think this is like knowing the way the Assembly operates or following on some of the other contentious bills. This was some sort of a series that they were playing. Let's do some sort of a distraction mechanism. Diaspora will get their attention, but one area that was very contentious is the use of attestation. This was not only challenged before the election day. During the process, Gambia Participates, Activista, and some other youth groups went to court to challenge it. The EWC observed the process, and we've seen minors registering in high numbers, alleged non-Gambians registering in high numbers, and we've seen the disparity from the presidential elections to the parliamentary. And even on election day, when some opposition groups came together to say the election was not free and fair because foreigners were registering foreigners were voting on the day. So having the attestation being issued by alcalos, we know a lot of the alcalos in most of the communities are, let me say, all the alcalos are appointed through a process which is political. From the alcalos issuing attestation to the chiefs issuing attestation, which are also the same line political. So how do we make that process very, very transparent? It's just going by the ID card, the passport, that we know there are controls and checks. But with the use of attestation is one that I am sure we'll have a broader reflection on, as we have done with the diaspora voting. We'll provide another position paper on, and we'll do another follow-up engagement to making sure that if we want possibly at least a sanitized election process with a credible voter list that we'll all be very satisfied with, the issue of attestation should be a thing of the past. If I can just give an example of the elections watch observing in one of our observation days, this is in the town, at Old Johnson Primary School. Every individual that registered from 8 a.m. all the way to 4 p.m. uses attestation.
Yeah.
And this was flat. You cannot tell me just one closest to Banjul, another very closest to Kanifing IEC Immigration Center.
Yeah.
No individual has an ID card or a
Birth certificate.
or a birth certificate. Just one has a health center that issues birth certificate. So the mind cannot take it that you can tell me people in that community, where I am from, ironically, from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., all the people that registered, no individual has these three documents. Everybody is to be an alcalde attestation. How do we explain that? There is something fundamentally not right. So to get that right, I think the issue of attestation should be another one that we should be making noise about. We should come up with position paper, and definitely it's something that we should look at before the next.
But as we go on, like Uncle Sal said, the media is the fourth estate. We count on your continuous support in disseminating this information to the whole Gambian public. The journey of building a better Gambia does not only stop with the activists, does not only stop with the CSO organizations. The media play a bigger role in disseminating the information and making sure that the hard to reach, and even those that are not within the confines of these organizations, all get that information. We appreciate your participation in this press conference. The call was very late. Under 24 hours, all of you are able to respond to the call. That shows how much interest you have in the process, and we thank you sincerely for honoring this call. We will do another call. We'll keep engaging all of you, and we believe and we hope that this process will be more engaging, and we'll try as much as possible to not only engage with the National Assembly members, but as well the communities, which you have a good audience and a good coverage of, is building the future of the Gambia. This is beyond the assembly members that are sitting in the assembly. The 53, 58 of them that are in that assembly is beyond them. They are representing us in that place. So it's important they do things that reflects our wishes and our aspirations of the Gambia that we want. And to get a broader public engagement on is through the media houses. And today that you are here, we believe you'll continue carrying that message across. And from the Gambia participates the Edward Francis Small Center for Rights and Justice, and as well the Elections Watch Committee, which is a consortium of 7 youth organizations being hosted by Peace Ambassadors, the Gambia, Activista, National Youth Parliament, Think Young Women, Be Kanyang, and as well the Gambia Federation of Disabled, forming that consortium, looking towards promoting the integrity of the electoral processes. We appreciate your coming, and we want to say thank you, and that's what I am tasked to do, to thank you for coming.
Thank you, Commissioner. And